So as we said at the end of the conclusion of the last lectures, in this lecture we are going to focus on a slightly different question. In fact, a question that we had asked at the beginning itself after analyzing the two-state on-off chain. We had asked questions about the limiting behavior of the Markov chain. So these are the questions that we would actually study. Namely, for example, is there a limiting distribution, a stationary distribution, etc., etc. Of course, we won't get right away into those questions. Instead, we would develop and build a machinery which would finally be, would help us in actually getting answers to these questions. So in this, we are going to focus on roughly questions that were asked after we did the detailed analysis of the on and off chain. So mostly with limiting behavior of a chain. So we are basically going to start with that. So first question that we asked was, like we saw in the on-off chain, does every Markov chain have a limiting distribution? The on-off chain was shown to have a limiting distribution. We calculated that. The next question, of course, is, if a limiting distribution exists, is it unique? So there's already an if here. What about stationary distribution? In case of on-off chain, we saw that the limiting distribution, which was unique, also turned out to be a stationary distribution. So a natural question would be, for a general Markov chain, does a stationary distribution exist? Is it unique? And naturally, taking a cue from the on-off chain, where the unique limiting distribution turned out to be also unique stationary distribution, in general, we would ask any connections between limiting distributions and stationary distributions. So these are roughly the questions we'll be centering around and try eventually to get answers to these questions. However, instead of addressing these questions right away, we will first focus on a slightly different question. So we'll formulate the question that we're going to investigate and then proceed to get a comprehensive answer to that question. Now, the result that we will get is perhaps the most significant and important result in the theory of Markov chains. But in addition to that, what is important is that this result will also help us in completely answering the above questions that we've asked right after the on-off chain. So there is relevance. Okay. So the question to be asked. One simple way to motivate the question that we are going to ask or pose comes from the classical strong law of large numbers that you learn in basic probability. I'll, of course, put it in a slightly different formulation, the classical law of large numbers. Typically, you deal with IID real valued random variables, but let's consider a sequence x1, x2, etc. of S valued random variables, where S is some countable set. So this is sort of to keep conformity with a Markov chain. Remember, the Markov chain corresponds to a sequence x0, x1, etc., etc. of random variables taking values in a countable set S. Need not be a subset of real numbers. Now, how does classical law of large numbers come into play for S valued random variables? Well, here is how it does. If the xn's are IID with common distribution, let's say pi sub x in S, because xn's are S valued, the distribution would be a probability on S. Then for any function on S to R, that means any real valued function on S, for which that quantity mod fx pi x, that series, that sum is finite, one has the ratio 1 over n summation k equal to 1 to n fxk converges to the sum over fx pi x with probability 1. How does this follow from the classical strong law of large numbers? Well, essentially, that's what is explained here. If the xn sequence are IID sequence S valued, then if you look at fxn, this would be a sequence of IID real valued random variables, and the mean would be, common mean would be simply fx pi x. How do you calculate the expected value of fxn? it would be simply, since fxn is a function of xn, it will be simply the value of f at x multiplied with the probability of xn taking the value x. So that's exactly what it is. So you see, that's how classical strong law of large numbers gives you this result. So now I come to the question. Suppose that in place of an IID sequence of s-valued random variables, I have a Markov chain xn indexed by n equal to 0 onwards with state space S. So these are also s-valued random variables, but no longer IID sequence. This is a Markov chain. But the question that we're going to pose will be the same. The question that we ask are, can we still claim, as is the case for IID situation, that still, even when xn is a Markov chain with state space S, is it true that for f real valued function on S, this 1 over m n summation k equal to 1 to n fxk converges with probability 1? If not always, when does it converge? And secondly, see, it's only a converging. In the case of IID, we know that it converges to what? So that question comes up here also. So in case the above holds, that means that sum 1 over n summation k equal to 1 to n fxk, suppose it converges with probability 1, what would be the limit? Because here there is no question of common expectation, etc. The xn's now are not identically distributed. So what would be the limit? So these are a question that we're going to ask. So we proceed towards getting a complete answer to this question. This answer that we'll get constitutes one of the most comprehensive results in the theory of Markov chains and includes a fundamental result popularly known as the ergodic theorem for Markov chains. Okay, in what follows, we'll consider an irreducible recurrent Markov chain. Later on, we'll generalize to others, but let's consider an irreducible recurrent Markov chain. Recall this notation that for any probability mu on S, P mu denotes the unconditional distribution of the Markov chain induced by the initial distribution mu. That is, we take the initial distribution to be mu, the given probability on S, and then of course we have the transition probabilities. These two together gives a complete distribution of the Markov chain. Of course, we have introduced the notation E sub mu for expectation with respect to this distribution. Fix a state y and let T R y for r greater than or equal to 1 denote the times of successive visits to the state y. So let me make it precise. T1y is minimum n greater than or equal to 1 such that xn is y. So starting from time 1, when is the first time that y is visited, and then for r greater than or equal to 2, try is the minimum of all n's strictly larger than tr minus 1 such that xn minus 1. So here we are looking at times after the r minus 1th visit when xn is y. So you can think of it as the rth visit. Well, since xn is assumed to be an irreducible recurrent Markov chain, we know from properties of such chains that the p mu probability that xn is y for infinitely many n is 1, because the p mu probability can be written as in terms of conditional probabilities. So you can write p mu as mu of x times p sub x of that event. But for every x, we know px probability that xn equal to y for infinitely many n is 1. So for every x, p sub x probability of this event is 1. So if you now take these px probabilities and then multiply them by mu x and add, you still get 1 for any mu. And as a result of that, so that tells you that under this probability distribution p mu, the state y would be visited infinitely many times with probability 1. That means, in other words, that t1y, t2y, etc., all of them would be finite. t1y would be less than t2y by definition, etc., and they would increase to infinity because they are strictly increasing integers. So they have to increase to infinity, and p mu probability of this event is 1. Now we define a new sequence of non-negative integer valued random variables. We want to call it zry for r greater than or equal to 0, and they're defined like this. z0y is just t1y, that is the time starting from 0 until the first visit to y. But for r greater than or equal to 1, zry is try minus tr plus 1y minus try. So let's see what these things mean. So z0y, as we just said, is just the time till the first visit to y, which is equal to ty in our usual notation. What is zry for r greater than or equal to 1? Well, from the definition you see that Z y represents the time after the rth visit till the r plus 1th visit to y. So the gap between the rth visit and the r plus 1th visit, the interval, time interval between. So that's what Z y is. Now here is a very, very important, useful proposition. Shouldn't be very surprising, but nevertheless. For any mu, if you look at the random variables Z r y are equal to 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. So we have a sequence of random variables indexed by integers, non-negative integers. These random variables independent under P mu. So whatever be the initial distribution, these random variables are always independent. And if in particular you look at the Z r y's for r equal to 1, 2 onwards, they are moreover identically distributed, and the common distribution is the same as the py distribution of ty, that is the same as the distribution of ty conditioned on the Markov chain starting at y. So this is very, very important and will be very useful. So here's a proof. Let's consider the joint distribution, for example, of z0y and z1y under P mu. So what we have to calculate is for m and n greater than or equal to 1, because both these random variables take values, integer values greater than or equal to 1, we have to look at the probability of this joint event and see what happens. So the event z0y equal to m and z1y equal to n, let's unfold this event. What does this event mean for the Markov chain xn? So what it means is precisely what is written there. That means for all k's up to m minus 1, xk is not y. At time m, xm is y. That reflects the fact that z0y is m. And then after m, again, xm plus k is not y for k between 1 and n minus 1, but xm plus n is y. So that says that the gap between the second visit after the first visit is exactly n. So this event in terms of the z0y and z1y taking values m and n has been completely written in terms of the Markov chain xn. We were supposed to calculate the p mu probability of this. So to calculate the probability of this long complicated event, it's very simple. Use this fact that probability of A intersection B is probability of A into probability of B given A, and the A and B to be used in this particular case would be A would be xk not equal to y for k up to m minus 1 and xm equal to y. That would be the A part, and the B part would be what remains. So with that A and B, use this result, and then use Markov property for the conditional part. So conditional part of what? The P mu conditional probability that xm plus k not equal to y, etc. for all k up to n minus 1, and xm plus n equal to y conditioned on the event A, that is x1 is not y, x2 is not y, xm minus 1 is not y, and xm equal to y. And now for the conditional probability, Markov property takes over. That is, you are given the history up to time m, and at time m it's y, and then you are asking the conditional probability of something in the future. So using that, you would precisely get the probability of the event that we're interested in would turn out to be the P mu probability that xk is not equal to y, so that's the P mu of A. And the second part, the conditional probability part, given that xm equal to y, the conditional probability would be exactly the same as that for a Markov chain starting at y is visited for the first time at time n. And that is simply saying P mu probability. So the first term is P mu probability that ty is n, but the second term, more interesting, is Py probability that ty equal to n, because now the Markov chain is starting at y. So what does that show? That shows that we have been able to write P mu probability of this joint event z0y equal to m and z1y equal to n as a product of P mu probability that ty equal to m and Py probability that ty equal to n. This shows that under P mu, at least these two random variables z0y and z1y are first of all independent, because we have been able to write the product probability, the joint probability, as a product of two probabilities. But moreover, the two factors in the product also identify what are the P mu distributions of z0y and the P mu distribution of z1y. Most notably, the P mu distribution of z1y turns out to be the same as py distribution of ty. That comes from the second fact. Now, you can use similar arguments. Instead of 2, you could just take 3 or etc. In general, any r. For any positive integers n1, m and n1, n2, nr, you can look at this joint probability, and by the same kind of argument, you could show that this is the product of this. Idea is that this, if you look at the event z0y equal to m, z1y equal to n1, etc., zry equal to nr, just a little bit of thought, if you could think of these events in terms of the Markov chain xn, you can easily see that z0y equal to m, z1y equal to n1, etc., zr minus 1y equal to nr minus 1, this joint event really represents history up to time n, which is m plus n1 plus etc., nr minus 1, and xn equal to y. And the other part of the event, that is the one that is missed out, zry equal to nr, represents future over the period n plus 1 onwards up to n plus nr. So then you know how to use the Markov property, etc., etc. So since this decomposition, factorization is true for all r greater than or equal to 1, the proposition is proved. Why? Because this shows that not only that z0y, z1y, etc., zry are independent under p mu, because the joint probability has been able to, we've been able to write it as a product, but more importantly, this factors in the product, especially the second, third, etc., up to the rth factor, also identifies the p mu distribution of z1, z2, etc., zr. And you see that all of them are same, namely the py distribution of ty. So that was to be proved. So the proposition is proved. Now we are going to need a special version of SLLN to go ahead, which says, remember from what we've just seen, if you look at the whole sequence zry for r equal to 1, 2 onwards, what we have shown is that under p mu they are all independent, of course, but they also have the same distribution, so they are IID. We want to apply strong law of large numbers to this IID sequence. But the trouble is that in general in strong law of large numbers, you also have a condition on finite mean. We don't know anything like that. We don't know whether the py distribution of ty has finite mean or not. So we need a special version of strong law of large numbers, which says that for IID sequence of non-negative random variables, SLLN holds, the law of large numbers holds without requiring finiteness of the common mean. So what I'm saying here is that if you have an IID sequence, then to apply strong law of large numbers, usually you need finiteness of common mean. But if your IID sequence happen to be non-negative sequence, that is random variables are all non-negative, then you don't need finiteness of common mean. The strong law of large numbers still holds. Of course, the limit be either finite or infinite, depending on whether the common mean is finite or not. But that limiting result still holds. So we now use this particular version of strong law of large numbers for the IID sequence, as I said, z1y, z2y, etc. And what we get, well, the sum of z1y, etc. up to zry, that partial sum actually becomes nothing but tr plus 1y minus t1y. You can see that from the definition of the z1y, z2y, zry. So that sum divided by r goes to ey of ty, which is the common expectation of the zry's. Remember, each zry for r greater than or equal to 1 under p mu has common distribution which is the same as py distribution of ty. So the common expectation would be ey ty. So this is the strong law of large numbers applied to the sequence z1y, z2y. And what the strong law of large numbers says, that the limit holds with p mu probability 1, whatever be mu. So the thing, as I said, to note here is that common p mu distribution of the zry's for r greater than or equal to 1 is the same as the py distribution of ty. Therefore, the common mean is ey of ty. Also, at this stage, because these are all non-negative random variables, which is why we were able to apply this, get this strong law of large numbers, we do not need or use the finiteness of this common mean. Note that the states are being assumed recurrent. So we don't know that py probability that ty is finite is 1. However, it's one thing to say py probability that ty is finite is 1, but it's another thing to say that ty is finite. So ty may be infinity. That's possible. Of course, since ty takes values only greater than or equal to 1, ty would be greater than or equal to 1. There's no question on that. Now, notice that we have left out z0y, which is why we got tr plus 1y minus t1y over r. That converges to a certain limit. But since t1y is finite with probability 1, therefore t1y by r itself would have to go to 0 with probability 1. So therefore, by using this, we conclude that with p mu probability 1 as r goes to infinity, just tr plus 1y over r converges to ey of ty. And of course, if tr plus 1y over r goes to ey of ty, then you can easily verify, it's simple, that try over r will also go to ey ty, because r plus 1 over r goes to 1. Now, for every n greater than or equal to 1, let's define another quantity, another random variable called n and y, which is number of k's between 1 and n, both included, such that xk equal to y. So what does it represent? N and y, if you look at the definition, it simply counts the number of visits to y during the period 1 through n, both inclusive. Of course, we know that as n goes to infinity, n and y goes to infinity with p mu probability 1. That is simply a reflection of the fact that with p mu probability 1, y has to be visited an infinite number of times in the entire. Now, so n and y goes to infinity with p mu probability 1. So we could go back to star, that result, where it says something goes to ey ty as r goes to infinity. Now r is a fixed sequence going to infinity, but we can get the same result by looking or letting n and y go to infinity. So using n and y in place of r in star, which we can do because n and y also goes to infinity. So we would get with p mu probability 1, we get what call it double star, ty sub n sub ny plus 1 over n sub ny goes to ey ty, and the same is true there. Okay? So essentially, we have replaced the fixed sequence r, which goes to infinity. We have used the random sequence n and y, which also goes to infinity with probability 1. Okay. But from the definition of the tr's and the ny's, you can easily see that for every n greater than or equal to 1, this is important. T n sub ny is always less than or equal to n, strictly less than t super y sub n and y plus 1. So let's try to understand what it is. What is n sub ny? It is a number of visits to y up to and including time n. What is t super y of that? It is a time of that particular visit. So obviously it must be less than or equal to n. So for example, suppose n and y is 10. That tells you that there has been exactly 10 visits to y up to time n. And naturally then, the time of the 10th visit has to be less than or equal to n. But what's more important is that n has to be strictly less than time of the 11th visits, because there are exactly 10 visits that have happened up to time n. So that's why this strict inequality, second strict inequality. Of course, now from that you get the other inequality trivially. And now we know that if you look at the last two inequalities, so n and y over n bounded by two quantities on two sides, but the two quantities on two sides we have just shown in double star that both of them go to, reciprocals of them go to ey ty. So these things would go to 1 over ey ty. So that has to force that the middle thing, n and y over n, has to go to the same limit, which is 1 over ey ty. Let's call it pi y as n goes to infinity, and this happens with p mu probability 1. So after all of this, the final result that we get is that n sub ny over n goes to 1 over ey ty, which we call pi y, as n goes to infinity. Now remember, in all of this, we never assumed that EY/TY is finite or infinite. So it's possible that EY/TY is infinite, in which case 1 over that would be 0. So that's allowed. So first of all, since the state y in S for which we did all of this was just chosen arbitrarily, therefore the above result holds for every y in S. What does this last result say? Let's try to understand that. What this result says is that whatever be the initial distribution, the proportion of time up to time n that the chain spends in a state y converges with probability 1 to a number pi y as n goes to infinity. So doesn't matter what's the initial distribution, whatever the initial distribution, you fix a state y, look at the proportion of time that the chain spends in y up to time n, then as n becomes larger and larger and larger, this proportion goes to a fixed number called pi y. And pi y is just the reciprocal of EY/TY. Important, for each y in S, the almost sure limit of this proportion, n and y over n, namely pi y, depends only on y and not on p mu, equivalent mu. That is, initial distribution does not make any difference whatsoever. Of course, n and y over n are random. They are random variables, but they are all random variables which are bounded between 0 and 1, because when you look at the proportion of time the chain spends in y up to time n, the proportion would be less than or equal to 1, and of course greater than or equal to 0. So this is a sequence of bounded random variables, bounded between 0 and 1, which converge with probability 1 to something. Therefore, one can apply dominated convergence theorem to deduce that for every y in S, E mu expectation of n and y over n, that n in the denominator is not random, it's fixed. So that ratio also goes to pi y as n goes to infinity. So that would be a consequence of that last result on almost sure limit, namely that n and y over n goes to pi y almost surely with probability 1 as n goes to infinity. Therefore, expectation goes to pi y also. So we could use dominated convergence theorem because the random variables n and y over n are bounded in 0 and 1. Now, last result about expectation was about E mu, and therefore it will be true for whatever is the initial distribution. So in particular, I could take the initial distribution to be delta x, the point probability at x, which amounts to essentially that the Markov chain is given to start at x. With this mu, you apply the last remark, that is, apply DCT, etc. We get one of the most fundamental results in Markov chain theory, often called the ergodic theorem for Markov chain. For any irreducible recurrent Markov chain, limit 1 over n, summation k equal to 1 to n, pxy super k, that limit is 1 over EY/TY for any pair of states x and y. So it's just a matter of computing what would be E mu of n and y when mu is taken to be delta x, and just verify that it turns out to be nothing but k equal to 1 to n pxk xy super k. Okay, we have denoted pi y to be 1 over EY/TY for y in S. Since EY/TY lies between 1 and infinity, it can take the value infinity, also can take the value 1. We immediately conclude that the number pi y that we define has to lie between 0 and 1 for every y in S. And it would be 0, of course, when EY/TY is infinite. For fixed S, so these numbers pi y are numbered between 0 and 1. Now for fixed S, we know that if I take pxy k, add over all y, that is 1, because it's just k-step transition probability starting from a fixed x, the transition probability, k-step transition probability of being in y. So if I add it over all y, the sum would be 1. And now if I add these over k equal to 1 to n and then divide by n, I would still get 1. And I can interchange because these are non-negative. So why are we doing this? Now let's see what is the repercussion of that. The repercussion is, if S is finite, then that would imply that 1 equals, which is this sum that we've just written in the previous statement, but then that goes to summation y in S pi y. That is because, remember, for every fixed y, 1 over n summation k equal to 1 to n p x y k, that goes to pi y. So the sum over y in S of that also goes to the sum pi y. And that of course is true because S is finite. So it's a question of interchange of limit and sum. Now what does it mean? That means summation pi y summed over y in S equals 1. We already know that pi y's are always numbers between 0 and 1. And now this is saying that in case S is finite, summation pi y is 1. That means that these numbers pi y as y varies to S gives us a probability on S. Of course, this is only in case that S is finite. So we have just seen that if the irreducible recurrent chain has a finite state space, then the numbers pi y, y in S define a probability on S. This naturally leads to questions. What if the state space is not finite? Would pi y, y in S still be a probability on S? Well, in general, no. In general, all we can say is that the sum of pi y's for over y in S can only be less than or equal to 1. That's the best we can conclude. Equality may not hold in general. Question. Naturally, if we know that equality may not hold in general, a natural question would be, when does it hold? Which of course equivalent to asking, when is this set of numbers pi y as y vary through S, when is it a probability on S? We'll come back to this question later and get a comprehensive answer. What we have just now seen is as a sort of a beginning towards the end, namely that in order to finally tackle the questions of limiting behavior in Markov chain, we just took the initial step, we proved certain results, and one of the most interesting results that we proved was very, very important result, namely what is known as the ergodic theorem for a Markov chain. So in the way of doing that, we end up getting these quantities called pi x's. Of course, we focused entirely on a closed, irreducible recurrent chain, and for a while we'll continue with that. And at the end, of course, we'll remove that restriction and also try to answers for not necessarily irreducible chains. But for the time being, these results would actually help us in getting those final answers.